There's a thing known as a second act problem. Beginnings and endings can be challenging, but at least we know what they are. We recognise them when we see them and when they're done well. The middle is an undefined blob that somehow gets us from start to finish. The first and second act plot points help us define that blob, by at least giving us a way in and then a way out dramatically. But that giant chunk in the middle, called Act 2, is still an undefined blob of opaque action. And that's where the story is. That's the journey. So how do you write that?
The Midpoint.
Spoiler alert, these are the films I'm going to be talking about in this tutorial, so do see them before you continue, otherwise you have been warned. Every writer struggles with this, so don't worry, you're not alone. In your average 2-hour film, Act 1 is about 30 minutes. Act 3, about 20 minutes, give or take. That means Act 2 can be up to 90 minutes long. For one act. Usually it's more like 60 minutes, but that's not the point. It's a big chunk of your story. First thing to do is split it in half, with another major turning point, the midpoint, creating Act 2 Part 1 and Act 2 Part 2. You can think of these as separate acts on their own. Structurally they are, but dramatically, the first and second act turning points are still most important. This is because they are primarily about your character's journey. They define the 3-act structure. The midpoint, on the other hand, is usually a key turning point in your A story, the main plot, the thing the inciting incident kicked off. Now that's not to say it isn't important to character, it is, but it tends to be more action than emotion-based.
Ken, you did great. We made so much money. That spirit is rich and powerful. Everyone learned from Sen.
And depending on your story, it is either a big moment of success or failure. The first half of Act 2 is your hero struggling to find a way forward and failing most of the time with either comic or dramatic effect.
We are not going to take her in our department.
She'll stink up the whole place.
They need information, they need the right allies, they need to try things out until they finally hit upon something that works. The midpoint represents the moment they either find that thing that works or realise everything they're doing is wrong and they have to completely rethink their approach. This first half is sometimes called the fun and games section.
What do we have here?
I hereby direct that all my assets, both liquid and otherwise, I leave in their entirety to Marta Cabrera.
After the midpoint, things start to get more serious. This is true for comedy as much as drama. The genre is irrelevant. The midpoint is where your protagonist starts to become the person they were destined to be, and where we see they will have to sacrifice something in order to solve the big problem. But that comes later.
What's really going on?
In simpler stories, the Act 2 turning point is the polar opposite of the Act 1 turning point. If their quest is to find a map, by the end of Act 2, they find the map. If they go into hiding in Act 1, then they are found by the end of Act 2. If the detective is tasked with finding the killer, by the end of Act 2 they have a pretty good idea who it is, even if they won't reveal it just yet. But audiences are wise to this. So what a lot of modern films do is move what would otherwise be the Act 2 turning point up to the midpoint. Let that moment of success or epiphany happen sooner.
Good move.
Give the hero what they want, only to find out it doesn't solve anything. They've been tricked.
Your heroes are scattered.
This is sometimes called the false victory.
Where is my disadvantage?
This raises the stakes to a new level so the story can keep surprising us. Knives Out did this wonderfully. So did The Dark Knight.
What do you want? I just want my phone call.
This makes the midpoint more than just a special high or low on the way to finding the answer. It flips the story on its head, subverting expectations. Of course, it means you then need to find another revelation for the Act 2 turning point. Something that still connects with Act 1. It's still surprising, and yet makes sense when you look back on it. It's become a different story, but not really. This approach is already becoming a bit tropey though. You can see it in lots of recent films, so the surprise twist you put in there may not be as strong as you'd hoped.
It's all about stakes.
Regardless of how you approach the midpoint and what you reveal, its function is to remind the characters what's really at stake, and to either get them back on track or start them on a new course of action. It can be as simple as getting that crucial bit of information, saving a critical witness, or losing them. It can be a dramatic chase sequence, or a quiet dialogue scene. Whatever it is, be it a success or a failure, after this moment, your hero is starting to redefine what's really important to them, and how they will go about getting it. Till next time, I'm Phil Moore. Chookers.